In 2010, Dr. Dickerson added politics to his endeavors, and he sought election to the Tennessee State Senate from District 20, where he resided. He won the Republican primary and then took on long-time incumbent Democrat Senator Douglas Henry in the general election. That was tough duty by anyone's measure, and Senator Henry was reelected yet again. After redistricting, Dr. Dickerson's residence became part of the 21st Senatorial District, and Steve went after that seat. I was privileged to be at his campaign headquarters on primary night, where we all felt good about his chances. He did win, of course, and just about the time the electoral results were announced, Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey showed up. I have to think that was about the Lieutenant Governor's first stop of the night, and it was a very important night because it was the kickoff for the announced goal of achieving walkout-proof majorities for the Republicans in the Tennessee General Assembly. In the midst of the jubilation at Steve's headquarters that night, Lieutenant Governor Ron had some very sobering remarks. He congratulated Steve on his primary victory, but then quickly noted that the Senate seat he was going after was in Davidson County. Nobody could remember the last time such a Davidson County-based position was held by a Republican. And we should prepare for a major battle in the general election. When they get through with him, even his own mother won't recognize him, said the Lieutenant Governor. Steve went on to run a vigorous campaign. I saw that firsthand when he would support our Green Hills group by arriving early, paying for himself and his staff members at our meeting. We used to meet at Sweat's restaurant then, and we had to collect a fee to cover breakfast and room rental. Steve would shake a few hands, share some greetings, but then leave before breakfast. Got to ring a lot of doorbells today, he would say, as he, Charlie, and others headed out the door for another day of campaigning. Dr. Dickerson won that campaign and was elected to serve as senator from the 21st Senatorial District. His success was no surprise to the folks I've spoken with who served as professional campaign managers and consultants for other candidates in the past. In addition to his attractive personality, ability to articulate winning positions on the issues, and just plain hard work, they pointed to the fact that he listened to the advice offered by his professional team and acted on it. All of us are active observers of Tennessee political campaigns, but not many of us have gone on to actually run for office, even though we may have thought about it from time to time. For today's meeting, Gail and I thought it would be a special treat to hear from one of our own who went for it. One was sworn in and now has actually served his initial term as a member of the Tennessee State Senate. We told Senator Steve we'd like to hear about things like why he ran for office, the highlights and lowlights of the campaign, after winning, what his expectations were about being a senator, the highlights and lowlights of his freshman term in the Senate, were his expectations met, and some behind-the-scenes aspects of actually being a Tennessee state senator that he could not have imagined. After tackling as much of that as he chose, we've asked him to review for us the GOP achievements during the session just ended and some issues on tap to be addressed next year. Now it's my privilege and delight to welcome one of our own, representing Tennessee's 21st Senatorial District. Here's Steve Dickerson.
Thank you, Peter, for that kind introduction. The only thing, there are 5 or 6 people that are absolutely key to the victory, and those are the folks. So we ended up winning it was actually 49% of the vote in the primary. went on. Philip North was my opponent, well-known guy from up in Madison, and we ran at each other a couple of times, debated each other a couple of times. He's a trial attorney, and I thought I was at a significant disadvantage in terms of debating him on one-on-one. And I'm not really sure what happened, but I ended up winning almost every debate, and I think it had to do with the fact that I ran before. And that's the next point that I really think is key. That is, if you lose once, if you know anybody that's going to run, tell them they have to run twice. Because running once really opened my eyes. It got me much more comfortable with the prospect of going up and shaking people's hands and meeting them, engaging them, saying, hey, I need your vote, hey, I need your money, hey, I need you to put up a yard sign. And I think part of the reason why I was able to best Philip North in the one-on-one meetings was because he had never done that before. And if he ran again in 2 years, I think he would be a significantly more formidable candidate than he was this time. And he was not insubstantial by any means. He raised a lot of money. He worked hard. He had a tremendous family name in Davidson County. The Norths have been here for generations. But I do think running before, and again, having opportunities at groups like this to come out and speak and sort of get used to doing it. If any of you all are musicians, you'll understand this analogy. I like to play in a band. And I play guitar, but my personality is more of a bass player. I like to stay in the background. I like to make sure that what I do is important, but that nobody really notices me. And as an anesthesiologist, that's what I do too. The surgeons are out there. They're talking to the families. They're the ones who are, they're the fighter pilots. They're the jocks of the whole thing. They're out there, blood and guts, and I've saved, your mother. I've done this, done that. If nobody ever knows I'm there in my professional life, I've done my job well. I put people to sleep, woken them back up. They're no worse for the wear. It's great. And that's kind of my natural personality. When you go into politics, you have to be the lead singer. You have to get up in front. You have to, be, I'm not going to say I'm flamboyant by any means, but you have to be much more willing to do that. You have to be much more willing to go out and engage people. And I kind of tend to hang back. And one thing I've really found, that you're going to maybe find this amusing, now that I've been elected, I can hang back because like the people that I want to talk to all seek me out now, like the lobbyists or the people or the elected officials. Oh, senator, and now I don't have to go grab them and physically. And you've been in politics, you know how it is. I used to have to go grab people to get their attention, and now all of a sudden they want to come talk to me. So it actually suits my personality much better. So it's worked out. It's worked out well. November 6th was Tuesday of Election Day. I spent the day out in Bellevue. Standing between Bo Mitchell and Charles Williamson. Those any of you who followed that race will know that was a very interesting place to be on November 6th. Because those guys were going at it, and I was standing between them. And we wrapped up about 6:30, the polls closed at 7. I went and took a shower. It was swelteringly hot. No, I'm thinking about the primary. No, it was actually cold. I was trying to remember which polling place I was sitting at. It actually got pretty chilly. And that's right. I forgot about the rain. That's right. It was a tough day out there. It beats digging a ditch. If you're out there waving a sign or digging a ditch, I figure I've still got it pretty easy. And so we had people go to each of the polls. We had about 90 precincts in our district. And I went to the one in Berry Hill. It's right next to our campaign headquarters. And it was raining. It was raining and cold. You're so right about that. And they have a guy inside that goes through and like, I don't know how they do it. They process the ballots, and then they tape them on the inside of the window at the Berry Hill police office or police station. And we read the numbers, and I think it was like 53 to 48 or something. I mean, there was one precinct in Berry Hill that I lost, and it looks really bad. If you look at the numbers, I lost 2-1. There literally were 2-1. It was there were 3 votes cast. My opponent got 2/3 of the votes. And so some of these precincts were very, very small. The turnout was very, very light. So I got the numbers, and we were going back to our headquarters to process them. And we had a computer and a spreadsheet, and it was really quite exciting being there. And I got a call from my consultant who had seen all the early data. He said, and it was about 10 after 7. He said, "You're going to win. I got to go by. Quick." And that was how I learned that I was going to win the race. He was actually running Mitt Romney's war room. He'd been we'd worked up the ladder, and so he was in Boston. It was very nice that he took the time to actually call me when he was processing the presidential race too. So at about 10 after 7, I knew that I was going to win, but we didn't want to declare until we had an insurmountable lead. We waited until we saw enough ballots that my opponent would have had to have won 100% of the outstanding votes before he could catch me. And he actually, we beat him in, I think, significantly in the early voting, and then we beat him on the day of. Basically, not surprisingly, he's from Madison. He did really well in the Madison, Goodlettsville area, Old Hickory, Hermitage, and we pretty much took care of business in Bellevue, Belmead, Oak Hill, Forest Hills, Green Hill, West End area, which is where a bulk of the population is. And so it was pretty exciting. So we went to the Hilton, or where was it this year? Where was the thing this year? It was the one, where was the big party?
Marriott.
Okay, Marriott.
Marriott.
Sorry, I don't get out much. I'm sorry. It was at the Marriott, and I walked in, and I mean, it was like somebody had flipped a switch. I mean, strangers, people throwing babies at me, kiss my baby, you know, touch me. God, it was surreal. Having gone literally from sitting in the audience, looking at people who are running, thinking, well, maybe I can do that, and then all of a sudden you win, and then it was a mind-blowing experience. And then Chris Devaney grabs me and said, we're going up to give a talk. And so I get to go up, and Frank Nicely, I don't know if you all know Frank Nicely from Strawberry Plains. How would you describe Frank Nicely to, or do you want to?
Unique.
He's unique. He is unique. Fascinating guy. And Frank and I had just been elected to the Senate. I don't know what Frank was doing in Nashville, but he and I and Bill Ketron went up and they introduced me. And what I said was, I've never said any truer words. That is, I've given a lot of talks as a primary candidate. I've given a lot of talks as a general election candidate. But I can tell you it's a whole lot more fun to give a talk as a senator-elect than everything else combined. I mean, it was like a weight had been removed from my shoulders. And as Peter, I think, alluded to earlier, Lieutenant Governor Ramsey looked back, and his staff did, and they can find no Republican ever elected to the state Senate in Davidson County before. Jack Johnson has had a little bit of the county. Right now, Farrell Hale has a little bit of the county, but mine is the first time that the district has ever been completely inside Davidson County with a Republican state senator. And there's some things I learned kind of in retrospect, and that was the Democrats had abandoned all their other races. They had 6 races they had targeted. They realized they couldn't win 2 of them, so they abandoned them. They pulled all the resources, all the money. The state Democratic Senate caucus and the party pulled all the resources out of those 2 races. They then realized there were 2 that they couldn't win, so they abandoned those 2 races, and they had all their money for the last month in my race and Mark Green's race up in Clarksville. And then about 3 weeks before, they realized that Mark Green's his opponent, had just done a horrible job. He had said some stuff and sent out some mailers that completely torpedoed himself. And his son Zoo said, if your opponent is basically attacking himself, back up and let him do it. That's a wild paraphrase, but this guy just literally self-destructed in front of everybody's eyes. And so then they took all their money, and for the last 3 weeks, all the money from the Democrats for the entire state went into my race in Phil North to try to beat me. And if I'd known that, I would have been much more nervous, but I was kind of blissfully ignorant. But we got to the November 6th, and I went up there, and all of a sudden, I win, and it's a new day, and November 7th, 8 o'clock, I took the day off from work. I'd been working full-time, and I took the day off from work on the 7th. And at 8:05, I get a call in the morning. I felt like I'd run a marathon. I cannot describe it to you. It felt like I'd been beaten by a baseball bat. And at 8:05, my consultant calls me and said, and I promise you this is true, and anybody that knows him, you know him, and you know it's true. He said, I spent the last 3 hours planning your re-election in 4 years. He said, we're a little bit behind, but I think if we work hard, I think our chances are good. And he literally had spent part of that night planning our re-election in 4 years. And so it never, ever stops. And that's another message. That's one more thing. It never, ever stops. My first fundraiser is in 10 days, and I don't run for 3 years. And so we're starting to raise money now for 3 years from now. So let's see what else Peter wants me to talk about. Hang on for 1 second. And any questions, feel free to jump in. Let's see. So I'd say that pretty much covers the election, don't you think, Peter? Yeah. Okay. How I got from kind of in the audience to on the podium. Let's see. Experiences during my initial term. Okay. Very interesting. On the day we got sworn in, and before I got sworn in, I probably spent, before I won the primary, I probably spent 10 minutes in the state capitol. I literally did really did not know where it was. I did not have any interest, in going down there. I wasn't a lobbyist. I didn't hang around the political crowd, but I knew I wanted to be a legislator. And so I figured, I want to be a state senator. I'm going to run. So now all of a sudden, I get elected. I go, like, where's my office? What do I do? People, I had no earthly idea where you park, all this stuff. So finally, they assign me a parking place, and I get a little pin, and I get a badge, and all this stuff. They give me an office, and this is, oh my gosh, this is one of those little quirky things, the state General Assembly. I got sworn in, I think it was on January 14th, give or take. And there's this elevator that takes you down to this long marble tunnel that goes to the office buildings. And it was like something out of a zombie movie. There were, all of a sudden, now that you're a senator, it's like people, Senator, I want to meet with you. Senator, let's get together. Senator, let's, and the lobbyists just come out of the woodwork. And there are 100 of them down there. And, 24 hours before, you're anonymous. Now all of a sudden, you're in the center of Tennessee politics. It was fascinating. So we get sworn in. Okay, everything's great, and then we adjourn for 2 weeks. Which is only in government would you do that. And the reason why we adjourn for 2 weeks is to pick offices. And I mean, I just to this day, it boggles my mind. We had people arguing about offices. I want one with a view. I want one with blue carpet. I want one with this. I want one so you go in, the door swings to the left. I want one near the bathroom. I mean, are you raising yes?
And it's because committees have to be set, and each senator turns in their preference, and you have to balance it, and that takes time because it's a little challenging.
You have given the most kind interpretation of that you could. I was assigned Andy Burke's office randomly. And he was a senator from Chattanooga who did not run for re-election. And I think he's now the mayor, if I'm not mistaken, of Chattanooga. And I was in his old office, and I had like 4 or 5 different senators come through. And they're going, no, I don't think my ego would fit in this office. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they would, and I was just sitting there. They just like walk through and like open the door. No, I'm not. And so I actually ended up getting Andy Burke's office. And so we cleaned it up. We actually found a bunch of pictures. It was actually kind of interesting. We found a bunch of old Chattanooga memorabilia behind the refrigerator and stuff. It was pretty cool. And so we took 2 weeks off, and then we convened. And the way the General Assembly in Tennessee works, it is still scheduled and set for working people. And I think that is a good thing. We don't convene until 5 o'clock on Monday. So you can work a full day, or at least a partial day, wherever you live in Tennessee, and can still come into town to serve. And there's a senator from Cookeville, Charlotte Burks, who to this day, correct me if I'm wrong, still farms every day. She gets up in the morning, and I don't know when, probably 3 o'clock in the morning, tends to her fields, gets in her car, and drives into Nashville to be a member of the General Assembly, and then gets back in her car and goes back. Or I assume she has a pickup truck. I mean, she's a farmer. I don't know, but she goes back and forth to Cookeville every day to farm. And she spends, what does she drive? You know,
the perception's not always correct.
She might be driving. She might be driving a Mercedes or something. I don't know. And so we start Monday at 5 o'clock. We meet all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and then Thursday until noon. And then you're basically done. Everybody leaves town. So you've got Thursday afternoon and Friday that are free to do other stuff. And so I worked every day all Monday, and I worked every Friday during session until the last Friday when we actually met. And I think one of the big benefits of the way the Tennessee General Assembly is set up is it encourages people to have jobs and to work. And that means you have to pay taxes, you have to live by the regulations you pass, and you have to see the results of the bills that you enact on a day-to-day basis. And I think that is one thing that really sets us apart from the people in Washington. Those folks, I'm afraid, and I'm not knocking any of our elected officials, because I think we have a great U.S. Senate, U.S. House delegation, though maybe we need one more Republican up there. We have got great folks up there, but you get into that sort of bubble in Washington, D.C., and you don't have to come out. They fly from Washington to their state capital, they see some folks, they raise some money, they attend some functions, they go back to Washington. In Tennessee, what we do is we leave and we go to work. And I'm very fortunate, and I sleep in my own bed every night, and I see my neighbors, and my neighbors, trust me, are very free in their complaints about what's going on in Tennessee. And I go out to the mailbox, and they go, "What are you thinking?" and I get a daily feedback from my neighbors, and I think that is a great thing. In terms of surprises and things that I have realized, and I sort of alluded to this as I was running, but it didn't really mean as much to me now that I've been there, and that is, and I hope I can articulate this, if you look at the Tennessee Code Annotated, which is basically the rules and regulations and laws that we've passed, if you go back 150 years, it was a book this big. And then Jack Johnson, who I think may be one of the best senators Tennessee has ever had, is from Williamson County. And he passed a law that brings in or forms the office of the repealer. And only in government would you see somebody start a new bureaucracy to cut down the size of bureaucracy in government. But trust me, it makes sense if you think about it in totality. But he's got this office of the repealer. He said, look, here's the Tennessee Code in 1878. It's this big, and if you stack it up now, we've got books stacked up on their side that are probably this. Don't you think it's 6, 7, 8 feet high? It's multiple shelves. And the point I'm making is, there's nobody up there, there's no constituency to cut out unneeded laws and statutes. There's not a lobbyist up there, there's not an efficiency lobbyist. And so by the very nature of government, we considered about 1,200 bills this year. The very nature of government is, unless you have somebody peeling back those laws faster than you're putting them in, you will over time have nothing but an increased number of laws, regulations, statutes. And it is almost a law of physics. This is like thermodynamics or gravity. The government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is something that stunned me. And so my philosophy, or my solution to that, since these are all let me rephrase that. Most of these laws are well-intentioned. They're trying to meet a need, fill a void, whether it's public safety, whether it's pharmaceutical safety, whether it's the potholes that are, the way trees are pruned. There are a million different things out there that have legitimate constituencies to enact laws regarding them. I don't think most of the bills we pass are badly intentioned or in any way nefarious. But the problem is, we keep passing more and more and more and more bills. So how do you counter that? And my thought is, since you've got well-intentioned people passing 1,200 bills a year, you have to put a choke point on this somewhere. And to me, it comes down to controlling the amount of money that you get into government that you can use to enforce and enact and promulgate these laws and the bureaucracy and the administration that is derived from it. And so, I hope I'm explaining, it's like a balloon. You squeeze the balloon here, the air goes here. And to me, the way to squeeze the whole balloon and get control of this is by controlling the fiscal component of it. By controlling the tax revenue that is available to the state government is, I think, the key way to control the size, complexity, and the amount of interference that our state government will have in our day-to-day lives. I don't know if I explained that as well as I should, but controlling the revenue side is the key, to me, to controlling what I think is the threat to limited government. Control the revenue, and I think you can control everything else. Because, again, you're going to have 1,000 bills a year. You got to control the state's ability to enforce or to promulgate these laws. I think there's a good analogy. Look at what's going on in Washington. There is no control on the financial and fiscal side. And I know this is almost, in the press, people mock, when Republicans say this, but they're literally printing money in Washington. They just literally have the presses going and the bonds and going back and forth. And, oh, we need another $100 billion. Boom, here it is. Another $1 trillion. Here it is. We don't do that in Tennessee. And I think that is one of our greatest assets and one of the great benefits of being in Tennessee with our governor, our speaker, and our lieutenant governor. We've got the 3 best folks leading our government that I could imagine having. And these folks have got a much better control over it. The other great thing about Tennessee and about the General Assembly is we got out of town. Mark Twain said that no man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. There's a lot of truth to that. The speaker and the lieutenant governor said we're going to get out mid to late April. We're going to go into our business and we're leaving town. And we got a lot of heat for people on both extremes, of the political spectrum. We need more time. We need more time. We have more bills. did what we needed to do, and we got out of town. And I think that was a great benefit to Tennessee. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to tell you about 3 or 4 what I think are legislative highlights. Let me make sure I'm hitting all the points.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. I haven't hit you with much behind the scenes. I'm not sure I can tell you a lot of behind the scenes stuff, or else it would not really be behind the scenes, would it? Maybe we'll dabble with that. I think if you were to get into a time machine and go 10 or 20 years into the future of Tennessee, there are 2 bills that we passed this year that I think are going to have some significant impact. One is the workers' comp reform. In Tennessee, workers' comp, if you look at the premiums that employers pay, they're a multiple, in many cases, of what other neighboring states pay. So it is very expensive to do business in Tennessee from the point of the workers' comp insurance we pay. Secondly, I don't think the patients are particularly well served. And I think they probably have a different term for them, but since I'm the physician that treats some of these guys, I call patients. These folks' cases drag on for years and years and years and years. And it's an adversarial system where it goes through the courts, and it is very, very contentious, and it is very, very expensive. And then I can tell you as a provider, there's nothing I like less than to see a workers' comp patient come through the door because of the bureaucratic and administrative headache that comes with that person. You're not treating the patient, you're treating the insurance company. And you have to clear everything. They frequently have a nurse that follows them around. You'll go into the room expecting to see, where's Beth Campbell, I'm going to go see this patient. And it's not her, it's her and this retinue of people from the workers' comp company that are going to tell you what you can and cannot do to treat this patient, how you're going to be allowed to treat them or not. And it is a nightmare in Tennessee. And they made significant changes in the system where it's not so much an adversarial system, but it's more of an administrative system. And I don't have a deep understanding of it, but it is a much more efficient, I think it's going to be a much more fair and much more cost-effective system over the next 10 to 20 years. So I think we're going to see significant benefit from that. If I had to pick one piece of legislation we passed that is going to be the most profoundly felt, and this is going to be the dog that didn't bark 20 years from now, we reformed the state employees' retirement system. And if you think about it, just very, very basic terms, there are 2 different sorts of retirement systems. There's a defined contribution plan like a 401k where you put in money, and how that money produces revenue, whether your stocks grow or not, is sort of up to you. So you can put in $10,000, so it's a defined contribution. On the other hand, you have a defined benefit, where for every dollar you put in, or for every dollar your employee or employer puts in, you're guaranteed a return on that investment. And I believe the number that we've been guaranteeing in Tennessee was 7.5%. And if any of you all have been following the market over the last 10 years, if I could have gotten 7.5%, I would have done anything I could to get it. It's just very difficult to get 7.5% return on your investment over the long haul over the last decade, and I think going forward for the next 10 or 20 years. And so Tennessee has this extraordinary potential liability because we had most of our employees, I believe, were covered under the defined benefit. That is, we were guaranteeing them 7.5% on a recurring annual basis. If you go to California, if you go to Illinois, they're basically bankrupt. And large parts of the reason they're bankrupt is because their retirement and benefits expenses for their state employees are more than they can handle. And I think it's in Stockton, California, I think just went bankrupt. Birmingham, Alabama, I believe, is insolvent. And we're going to see a lot of this over the next 5 or 10 years because they've overpromised their employees. So what we did in Tennessee was we went and shifted to a blended plan where there's a component of defined benefit and there's a component of a defined contribution. And it has taken a significant amount of risk off the state. Now, that does deprive some of our employees from a guaranteed return, but frankly, there's not a guaranteed return anywhere out there in the investment world right now. And it was putting us at extraordinary risk over the coming 20 years. And so I'm telling you about this bill because you're never going to hear anything about it again. So I think it's going to so completely shield Tennessee from risk 10 and 20 years from now. We're not even going to think about it. And I think that is great legislation, by the way. We've enacted it, it's taken care of a problem, and it's gone. And so 10 years from now, when other states, the other dominoes, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, California, New York, are all going bankrupt. They're all going into insolvency. They're all having to completely rework their systems in a very, very tumultuous way. I think we're just going to keep cruising. And I think it's a large part because of that one piece of legislation. A couple other facts about Tennessee, things that I've seen and kind of learned that play into that. Our roads, the roads in Tennessee are ranked in the top 5 in the United States. And if you look where Tennessee is geographically, the population and geographic center of the United States is in Missouri. And if you look where the population, hubs of New York, Washington, Pennsylvania, Florida, Illinois, Tennessee is the most ideally located state for commerce of any state in the United States, I believe. We've got great roadways, and we are at a great juncture, I think, in our economic future. And it's largely because we have a very pro-business group running the state. But if you look at our roadways, we're in the top 5. If you look at our debt to build these roadways, we're in the bottom 2. We have almost no debt, and so we've managed our roadway funds better than any other state in the United States. And we're going to see benefits from that because of our geographic location over the coming decades, because I think we're going to be a hub of commerce and I think probably manufacturing as time goes on too. But I give all due credit. Commissioner Schroer, TDOT is excellent. And